Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Welcome back to another amazing episode of Invest in Yourself, the podcast series. Not Invest in Yourself. I need to change that. Not the Digital Entrepreneur. We're talking podcast with one, the only, I'm going to mess up her name and I can't believe, Aeoliana.
Yeah, yes.
Yay!
Yes.
I didn't mess it up. Great. I'm never going to be saying the name again.
If we had it, we'd be throwing it. Woo!
Yay! Snap, snap, snap. You are a podcast law strategist. You have the Became method. We talked earlier about what you're doing with business, but now we're going to focus in on podcasters directly because we want to help them. They deserve to shine because podcast is the future of marketing, pretty much. I want to say it is because everybody's getting one. So quickly introduce yourself. So for those of the audience that haven't heard your docile tones, who are you? What do you do?
Hello, Phil. Thanks for having me again. My name is Aeoliana. I am from Tampa, Florida. I'm a mom. I'm a hockey mom, wife, paralegal, and a podcast launch strategist. So basically, like you said, what I do is I help people launch their podcasts without the overwhelm, without the overthinking. I focus a lot on the mindset, the background piece, but we do talk about tech, like how to edit, how to promote, how to produce, all of the things. So you have a balanced life and a balanced podcast, and you can do all of it.
I love it. That's what we need. We need more balance in our daily lives here, and especially when it comes to podcasting, because we're still such a young industry. We just celebrated 20 years not too long ago. The September 14th, I think, was 2004 was the first term podcast was used. But I know we're a bit older than that, but we're only 20 years into this industry. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. It's set to go, into 500 million podcasts by next year. It's insane how many people listen to them, how many people get into them, how many people start, don't know what they're doing, don't know how to do it, and quit. And then they're like, oh, podcasts are terrible. No, the numbers show like podcasts are the way to go, especially now with the new trends going towards video podcasts. Yeah. You're hitting it and YouTube taking over Google Podcasts as well. You're now doing two mediums. You're not just doing the audio, but you're also integrating that video aspect of it as well.
Yeah, it's hitting both sides. You're hitting their ears and you're hitting their eyes, and you're making it easier for everybody to find out about either your brand or what you like. Because you have those, pardon me, the hobby podcasters who are talking about movies, TVs, and all those fun little news bits. But then you got the business people who are helping other business owners grow their business, make more money, or even start their own business, or anywhere in between. So it's a great space to be in. How did you get started in the strategist section before we jump into your strategies?
Yeah. So I started doing producing, editing, things like that back in 2019, 2020. And I was helping clients do that in the background. I'm not a huge techie person, so I did not enjoy that part of it. I know for a lot of podcasters, that's their biggest hang up is the editing, because it's not fun. Like it's not fun. And so I was helping a couple of clients, and I had one specific client come to me and say, you helped me more with the strategy aspect of it than you did with the actual tech, because there were a lot of hangups that I had, a lot of roadblocks in my brain that I had about what I was doing. And you actually helped clear those. Have you ever thought about doing strategy consulting or being a coach for strategy? And I was like, well, I'm not really a coach. Like, I didn't want to call myself a coach. So I was like, okay, I'll do podcast strategist. I can handle that. And so that's how I got into it. Just, helping people go through the process of the podcast and focusing on not just the tech, which is important, but also focus on all those other things that when you decide to do a podcast, you don't think about. Like, you don't think about, how am I going to get more listeners? How am I going to put my content together? How am I going to do, XYZ? You only think about, okay, I need something to record and I need a way to record it and to put it out there. And that's all podcasting is. And when you learn everything that goes into doing a podcast, it can be really overwhelming, especially if you look at it all as a whole. So that's why I got into it. I try to help people break it down into smaller steps, and that way they're not overwhelmed by everything they have to do. Because in reality, everything that you do for your podcast, you don't have to do all at the same time. Like you can, and we're going to get into some strategy now, but
Mhm.
you can batch record episodes.
What
Unless
I do.
unless you're doing, like live interviews, which that's a little bit different, but you can batch record your episodes all on the same week and then batch edit all on the same week and then batch publish, just date them in your platform for whenever you want. And you can have, depending on how many episodes you record, you can have 4 or 5 episodes ready to go, already published. You just have the right date on them. You're not
It's
doing that every single day or every
no.
single week.
And it's a lesson most podcasters kind of slowly come to realize, that they need
Right.
to at least batch or figure out a selection of days
Mhm.
what they do, because if you don't spread it out, it's I remember when I first started, I was doing like 12-hour days. Just
Yeah.
it felt like 12-hour days doing coming up with the idea, recording the episode, and then
Yep.
editing the episode and uploading it all in one day. And it was just like you were exhausted and you burn out so
Yeah.
quickly. But figuring out which days, the batch, like I batch on Tuesday, Wednesdays and Thursdays are my day. I batch all my episodes. I do as many interviews as I can so
Mhm.
that I can, have the rest of the week to fiddle out everything and get scheduled. And I have episodes scheduled until mid-November,
Yep.
which is great because it takes the stress off. If you miss a week, you're like, oh, I didn't record anything. I don't have to worry. Content's going out.
Right,
Um,
exactly. That's the best part about batching, and a lot of people think, I have to have a specific mindset to batch, and you really don't. Like, you just have to set aside time to do it, whether it's a day, so every Tuesday, you record 1 or 2 episodes. Every Thursday, you edit one of those 2 episodes. Every Friday, you put it on a platform. Every Sunday, however you want to do it. And then once you start with the, rolling that out, you'll get more used to it. I was telling you when we were talking earlier, my podcast is coming out in December. And so I've already recorded 5 or 6 episodes. I've edited 3 of those 6 episodes. And now I'm just waiting to put them on the platform and schedule them out. So I haven't even started yet, but I have 3 episodes already in the bank ready to go. And I'm just, you just take it how your energy goes, how you're feeling. And that's another thing. If you get a lot of energy and you feel like you want to record a lot, record extra episodes. Because on those days where you're feeling down and you forgot to record, or an interview, canceled and bailed out at the last minute, you've got those things in the bank. You can just plug them into your platform and you've got something going out, and you don't feel as, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm left with nothing to do. What do I do? Have those episodes in the bank.
yeah, those episodes in the bank have saved my keister many a times
They will.
from not putting out episodes because I wasn't feeling it or I was sick. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I want to know,
Yep.
when you're sitting down with a brand new client that's like, I want to launch a podcast and it's going to be the biggest podcast in the world and everyone in the world's going to listen to it because everybody wants to listen to my podcast because I'm me. And
Right.
as being another person who helps people launch podcasts and get them dialed into who they should be talking to, how do you educate the client or the individual in understanding that saying you have a podcast for everybody means you have a podcast for no one?
Right. So the first thing I tell people, and this is like right from the get go, you have to know your purpose, your vision for your podcast, and your goals for your podcast. Those are the foundational pieces before you start thinking about What's my cover art going to look like? What's my promotion going to look like? What am I, even before you start with what am I going to talk about? You need to have that firm foundation of what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish with this podcast? Are you looking to monetize it in the future? Are you looking to do it as like a hobby, just something fun? Are you looking to leave people with a lasting message? Are you looking to educate and help people in whatever type of business you're doing? Um, you have to know that reason. You have to be very specific with what it is that you're doing with your podcast. Because the problem that a lot of starting up podcasters get into is they jump into the podcast without knowing that why first, which is basically when a podcast is like you're running a new business. And what's the first thing that when you get into business, people ask you, why are you doing this? What is your why? And it's because when you end up getting to those days where you don't feel well, you're sick, you're tired, your downloads maybe aren't where you think they should be, your listeners aren't where you think they should be, you don't feel like creating content, unless you have that solid foundation, that's where most people quit because they have no purpose. And once you check your analytics, and I know a lot of coaches will tell you, check your analytics, check your numbers. But if you don't know what your target number is, what's the point of checking your analytics? It's not going to matter. If you don't set the goal at the beginning of, for this quarter, I'm going to get 20 new listeners. If you don't set that goal at the beginning, you can reach 50 new subscribers or listeners or whatever, and you're not going to know that you surpassed your goal because you never set it.
So important. Oh my God, the goals are important. It's one of the biggest things. Like, people don't have. I think a lot of podcasters or business owners who go into podcasting don't understand that it's a new business. They just think, oh, it's just a medium. It's just like YouTube. It's nothing. It's a marketing tool. And they don't understand how powerful this is. How do you convey the power that podcasting has to the clients that just think of it as a marketing tool?
I think one of the main reasons a lot of people first think of it as just like a gimmicky marketing tool is because the podcasts they're listening to are ones with like millions of downloads. And so I try to introduce them to podcasts that are more in their range, like podcasts where they're done by one person. Everything's done by one person. And so they see how it's possible for one person to do it, but it's not going to have the same reach at this time that someone who has a team and has scaled their podcast because they've been doing it for 5-10 years is going to do it. So like you said before, people are going to come in and they're like, oh, I'm going to go viral. Everyone's going to love my podcast. Well, A, the goals are important. B, you have to almost pre-launch your podcast. You have to let people know that it's out there. You have to promote it. You have to do your own marketing. And if you don't know how to market, your podcast isn't going to go anywhere. So as you're doing the marketing piece, if you're not, a marketing guru, you're going to learn how to do all of those things. So at the beginning, just realizing that your podcast is not going to look like the top podcast. It's just not. You're doing it on your own. You're doing everything by yourself. And even if you have a team, very few podcasters, very few of us who are also business owners have the huge bankroll that $1 million podcasts have.
Yeah, like Diary of a CEO or
Yeah,
Joe
like
Rogan or Alex
we
Huberman
just
or
don't. Yeah, we just don't. And we have to realize that we cannot compare. And that's the biggest thing with podcasters is I think a lot of us compare ourselves to those bigger podcasts. And you have to realize that you can't compare your start to someone else's finish line. It's not the same. It's like apples and oranges. You cannot compare an apple with an orange. The only thing they have in common is that they're both fruits. Same thing with your podcast. Sure, both of you have a podcast, but your subject matter is completely different than someone else's. And even if the subject matter is the same, even if the topic is the same, the magic that every podcaster brings to the podcast is their words, their voice, how they put things together. And no one else can replicate that. So you don't want to replicate, like my husband watches Rich Eisen and his podcast. And you don't want to, like, I don't want to look at my podcast and be like, okay, I want to do it exactly like he does and talk sports all day. That's not going to work. So you have to look and see, okay, what am I bringing to the table? What is different about me? What am I coming in with that's different than everybody else? And then just stick with that and realize that it's not an overnight thing. It's a long process. It's called long form content for a reason. It is something that you do for the long haul. It's not get rich quick. It's not, it's like I said, it's just like a business. It's not get rich quick. It's not going to be an overnight success. You have to work at it and you have to be willing to put in the work day in and day out and be committed to why you're doing it. Otherwise, why bother?
Very true. It's insanely busy. There is no overnight successes here. And if you say, oh, but look at this person's podcast or this person's podcast, if they have a platform outside of the podcast, that's what got them to the next thing. It's just slowly moving their audience to different platforms and growing their thing. If you're starting off with zero scratch of an audience, the podcast is going to take months. And I love how you said it's long form content. Like it's true. It's for the long term. It's long term content, not long form. I like to make that differential because it takes so long because you got to get your wheels going because you have to get used to this new form of content because it's not like social media. It's completely different. Social media, you snap a picture, it can go viral in minutes, or a short video can go viral in minutes. Whereas a podcast, because it is that long form, can take longer because people may not want to listen to a 30, 45, 2-hour long episode in one sitting.
Right. And it's a more intimate setting too. Like your people are allowing you into their ears. People are allowing you to be with them, when they're trying to wind down or when they're trying to learn something. They're choosing to have you as part, so it encompasses so many areas, the marketing, the promoting, the nurturing, the education, sometimes podcasts that are educational can also be fun. So you have all of these different mediums all encompassed in one. And I think a lot of people forget how important it is to just take a second, realize what you're doing, realize why you're doing it, and how important it is in the grand scheme of things.
That's very true. I kind of want to touch on your became structure and your framework. First of all, how did you come up with it? And second, how can give us an overview of how podcasters can kind of start implementing them and then come to you to take it to the next level?
Sure. So the way I came up with it was I was doing a course and they told us, they're like, okay, put together your values. Like, what are the values that you have? And so I came up and the values I had, there were different ones and I could pull them up on my computer and go through them. But then it was, okay, break them down to 5 or 6 because I had like 9 or 10 on my values. And so the main ones that I landed on were balance, communication, collaboration, authenticity, mindset mastery, and empowerment. And then I'm a big Enneagram kind of person. So I was like, okay, can I make this look like a word? And I was like, became. Awesome. Because you're becoming something with the podcast and you're helping people become, something with your podcast and things like that. So that's how that came about. How I use it for myself, for my clients, is basically you have to know, you have to have a balance in your life. So many people think that you have to choose between one or the other. You can't have a life and a podcast at the same time. You have to choose. Now, the truth is, yes, you have to choose in that moment because you cannot, multitasking is not a thing. You have to choose where your focus is going to be for that moment. But that doesn't mean that you can't choose both your life and your podcast. Communication and collaboration. I'm a big believer in, regardless of what your medium is, regardless of what you choose to do with your life and with your voice, communication and collaboration are two huge things. You cannot have any type of business, any type of life, any type of relationship if you're not willing to communicate clearly and you're not willing to collaborate with the people you are surrounded by. Um, Authenticity falls into where I try to help people find their unique voice, find what their unique message is, not the cookie cutter version that they think they want to say or the way that they think someone wants them to sound like, but who they truly and authentically are, because that is where the magic happens. People are no longer listening to cookie cutter strategies, to cookie cutter business, anything. Everybody understand, we're in a point now where everybody understands how magically unique we all are, and to try to come up with a podcast or speak in a way that sounds like someone else is just going to have a lot of people going, well, you sound just like this person. And that automatically kills your trust factor, which is what podcasting is built on. And then mindset and empowerment. I'm a big believer in your thoughts are the most important. They are the ones, they're the catalyst towards your feelings, your actions, and your results. Unless you have that mindset and those thoughts in check, nothing else matters. Nothing else is going to work out. You're going to keep reliving and recircling like a hamster on a wheel. You're going to keep doing the same thing over and over again until those things are dealt with. And then with the empowerment, I try very hard to let people know that your voice is enough. You're enough. And every time you step up to that mic and you speak your truth and you speak whatever your message is, you are empowering not only yourself, but every single person that's listening to your voice and to your message. So that is how I go about the strategy. And we talk about editing, we talk about producing, we talk about, recording and things like that. But in my opinion, you can have the best tech in the world, but if you don't have that framework in line, or at least working on it, your message isn't going to go anywhere. It's not going to reach the people that you want to reach because it's not truly who you are. You're not communicating what your message is, what your truth is. And so hopefully that answered your question.
It does. It does. It allows me to segue into another question, but I want to touch on it. You can have, like, there's a lot of people who have the greatest tech. They have the Rode mic, the Rodecaster Pro 2, the the $7,000 camera setup, the lights and all that. And their podcast is boring as heck.
Yeah. Yep.
And they were sold a bag of goods, like, make sure you have this, and this, and your podcast will be excellent. It's not that. It's like you said, you have to figure out what's the authentic voice that you want to talk to your audience with, and that's who you connect with. Because other than that, you're going to connect with people that either won't want to buy from your business if you're using it to grow your business, won't go to your social medias to find out more about you if you're using it to increase your authority, because those people aren't your true audience. They're not the people that you're trying to go after. So I love that. And I genuinely enjoy hearing you break it down like that, because it is true. You need to have that authenticity. Authenticity is probably the one thing that I feel the world needs more of. And I think we're moving into that a paradigm shift into more authentic life, since we've been from a cold world, if you will, of sterilization, of not allowing anybody to have their opinion on anything.
Yeah, I think since COVID, I think a lot of people not only realized how important authenticity and vulnerability is, but also how important it is that we're connected. Like how much alike we all are versus what the world tries to tell you that everybody's so different. Yeah, we're different in our uniqueness, but we are all the same in the problems that we face and the way that we face them. And it's in that unity and in that community that you find ways to overcome those obstacles, to get better at what you're doing, to push forward. Whereas before you like the fact the one thing for me that podcasting has done and continues to do is it allows me to connect with people that I never would have met otherwise. And to have that ability, when you have a bad day, or when you're down with something, or I have a few clients who do grief podcasts and things like that. If you're going through grief, you can pull up a podcast and listen to someone's episode and know that you're not alone, because grief can be such a something that makes you feel so alone.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that everyone deals with grief, but when you're dealing with it, you feel so isolated. And to be able to pull up a podcast that talks about grief or your specific grief, and you hear someone else has gone through that, it helps you to look, okay, I this person did it, I can do it. And that to me is one of the biggest reasons why I do what I do. I know that there's a reason why, if you want to start a podcast, and I say this to all your listeners, if you want to start a podcast, it's because there is a message within you that someone out there needs to hear. You're not going to know who they are. You may never know who they are, but there is something in you. There's a message. There's something that you have in your heart to say that someone out there needs to hear. And if you don't put that podcast out there, that person may never be able to hear that. They may never hear it. And you could have changed the life, and you didn't, because you thought it was too hard. So hopefully that's not too hard.
That is a little tough love.
That is a little tough love. I mean that with all the love.
Yeah, of course. No, and it's very true, because we as podcasters, and business owners, as individuals, we have experiences that we can share, and that we can. There's 8 billion of us in the world. We all, if you put 8 people in a room, they fit into 1 billion people. There's something about them that connects to a billion people, and your message can help solve someone's problem. It can help, alleviate an issue that someone has. If it's with their grief, like, oh, this is how I overcame my grief, and the person listening to it attempts to use that thing, and it solves their issue or lessens the grief that they feel. It changes the world into a more healthier, better place. And that just brings more love into the world. That brings more kindness, and it just keeps the world going into a healthier place, because we are sharing how to become better versions of ourselves, or dealing with issues that we have. With your podcast having been launched, but launching in December, what is one goal that you do have with your podcast? What is it that you want your podcast to kind of resonate with?
I think for me, the one thing I want it to resonate with is just people realizing that it's not as difficult as they maybe think it is. Going more towards the, don't burn yourself out. Don't overwhelm yourself with everything that you have to do. Take it in small steps. Just like everything in life, take it in small steps. Sit down and do just enough that you can do. And then the next time you go, try to do it a little bit longer. And the next time, try to do it a little bit longer. And eventually you'll realize that you can do pretty much anything if you just break it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
I like it. Great advice for beginning podcasters and anybody. Really break it down into those manageable steps. We have so many tools that can help you break down things into manageable steps. I believe there's a website called Goblin Tools, if I'm not mistaken, or something along those lines.
So cool.
Yeah, it's literally you put in the thing and it can go very detailed or as little detailed. I'll make sure it's in the show notes. The proper
sounds
tool.
very cool.
Yeah, or you have ChatGPT that can help you as well.
Oh,
There's so many.
my best friend.
It is my best friend. It's the one that helps me do my intros and the questions for the podcasts because
Same.
it's smart. It's smarter
Do
than
you
me.
have that blinking cursor in a blank screen syndrome? I have that.
No, because I have come to a point where I automate
Oh,
things.
okay, so you don't even get there.
No, I don't even. I used
You don't
to
even get
trust
there.
me.
You bypass that. You don't even get there.
I used to start with that, and I was like, okay, how do I intro this guest?
Right.
And then when ChatGPT dropped, I was like, savior. And I just started
Yeah.
using ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT actually will teach you how to use it by just asking it.
Asking you questions. Yeah.
It is probably the most powerful tool that has been invented since the internet, and I'm very happy with it. Now you have Claude, you have so many other tools out there using AI to take it to the next level. I want to know where you see, since we're still such a young industry and podcasters, as a podcast industry, where do you see us in 10 years, the next decade of podcasting? What do you see happening?
I think it's going to go into more like a lot. You would think there's a lot of mindset podcasts, and there really aren't. I think it's going to go more in that direction, but not in the direction of like gurus, more in the direction of this is what I want to do. How do I do it for myself? So, personal development, education, um, things like that. People learning just the way that YouTube is a search engine. I totally see podcasts going in the direction of if you're looking to learn how to do something, podcasting is going to be how you learn to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. Um, so that's where I see it more of in practical applications versus just the entertainment. I mean, sure, the entertainment's still going to be there, but I do believe that the personal growth and the education is going to be something that's going to be huge in the next, and probably the next decade.
All right, we are coming to the end of the episode, which I hate. I always love chatting
Aw.
with podcasters, specifically because we're the best. I'm just gonna say
We
we are the
are.
best
We are.
because we have the fountain of knowledge right at our fingertips with this. But if you could leave the audience with one gigantic thought piece, something that they could sit on and think about when it comes to either podcasting or starting a podcast, what do you want them to take away from this whole thing, that think piece?
Let's see. Probably to just go out there and do it. Don't worry about what people are going to think, what people are going to say. I'm going to touch on what I said before, where if you have something in your heart to say, there's a purpose for it. Um, and just give yourself the grace to be a beginner. Don't rush the process. Give yourself the grace to be a beginner. Enjoy the beginning phase of it because that's where you're going to learn the most. If you rush it, you won't learn what you need to learn. Take the time, give yourself the grace, give yourself the time to be that beginner.
Ooh, I love that. Always good to be a beginner at something,
Yeah.
because before we become experts, we have to be a beginner, right?
Right. Right.
I'm going to jump off stage here. I want you to let the audience know where they can connect with you,
Okay.
Aeoliana, and let them know what your podcast is called so that they can keep an eye out for it when it launches in December.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So you can reach me in my website. It's www.topshelfvirtualservices.com. And that has all the things, the links. It's got my blog in there. It has a link to my newsletter. You can catch my free podcast launch and tech playbook there. My podcast coming in December is called Your Voice Uncovered, the Became podcast. And yeah, I'm on Instagram, Aeoliana.Elliott. I'm on TikTok. I am on Facebook. My Facebook group is called Podcast Strategy with Heart. But all of those things can be found on my website. Again, that is www.topshelfvirtualservices.com.
And of course, you can find those in the show notes as well to connect with it, Aeoliana. If it's not there, it's my fault, but I'll make sure they're there. 100%. At least the website will be there, and the link to the Facebook group for sure, because it's an amazing Facebook group. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and chatting with us about podcasting and everything you're doing and how you help podcasters launch with a great strategy with the Became framework. So thank you so much again for being here. Thank you for having me, Phil. This was a lot of fun. To my audience, like I said, you can start your podcast today when you have a strategist like Aeoliana. I messed up. God dang it. Like the podcast strategist herself, you can connect with her with the show notes. And as always, remember to invest in yourself.